Good afternoon, people. How are you doing today? I am here with another series of Beyond the Pulpit, and today I'm so blessed to have Mr. Bobbie Richards with me today here in the church. Welcome, Bobbie.
Well, thank you, Wade, and I'm glad I'm here
I am
after
too.
all these years.
Bobbie is I'm going to say this in the right way, I think. Bobbie is our oldest active, living member. And she's also has the privilege of saying she's the oldest member living at this point, which is an awesome, awesome thing. So we wanted to get Bobbie in and just sit down and talk to her about the changes and what she remembers back in the old church, about how it started, and talk a little bit about love life and that kind of thing too, okay? You just go right ahead, Bobbie.
Okay, well, when they first organized the church in 1944, they had an interim pastor, H.O. Ward, for 3 months. And then Reverend James Richards, he was elected to be the pastor in July of 1944. And before that, he had found out that he had a missing cousin living here in Kingsport. And he had a great uncle to leave North Carolina, and they never knew where he went to. And so anyway, his cousin here, Roy Richards, he found out about the North Carolina families. And so he takes his family and goes visits them. And so then in 1943, they bring their family, the Richards, Reverend Richards, he brings his family to Kingsport to see his cousin Roy. And so that's how...
So that's how they got into the community.
Yes.
That's how the Lord drew them into the community.
Yes.
Isn't that amazing how things,
and
you look back
so,
and see those things now. That's
awesome.
Yeah.
And so anyway, then in October of 1944, we moved here from Virginia. My parents did.
That's the Doubts.
The Doubts,
yes.
Yeah. And we moved down here on Holcomb Street. So that Sunday night, we were always used to going to church.
Yeah.
That was just our thing. And that Sunday night on October the 4th, my sister Thelma Miller and my friend Margie Falk, we went to Kingsley. And at that time, Bloomingdale and Kingsley, once a month, Bloomingdale would go to Kingsley in the congregation and the pastor, and he would preach. Then the next month, Kingsley would come to Bloomingdale.
So they just joined forces one time a month.
So this, on October the 4th, when we visited Kingsley, the Richards were there. Preacher Richards and the congregation from Bloomingdale was there.
Now, I believe Mr. Richards had a young son by that name that you kind of took sparking to. What was his name?
Ples.
Yeah.
And that's when I met Ples, my future husband.
So that's how you all met.
And so far, I followed him to Bloomingdale.
You followed him to Bloomingdale. You became a Baptist real quick.
Yes.
That's awesome.
I'd always been a Methodist. I grew up in the Methodist church.
That's wonderful. That is wonderful.
But anyway, that's how come. And then the last of October, they had a revival. And a bunch of people were saved at that time. Well, then in November, they didn't have a baptistry in that little white church. So in November, we went to North Fork, Holston River, and 18 of us at that time was baptized, your mother and me included.
Yeah.
And so then I became a member in November of 1944.
So the church opened in April and was ordained in April. And then you started coming late that summer.
In October.
And in October, you come to a revival, and several of you were saved. And so that was late November when you all were baptized.
I don't remember what day it was.
Something about the 29th or something like that, maybe. I mean, it was late. I've got it on record, but surely it had to be cold in that river.
Well, I don't remember that.
That's awesome.
Some things you just shut out.
Yeah, some things you just shut out. Well, now we have a baptistry behind us, of course, and we turn the heater on way ahead of time so it's good and warm for people. So I wonder how many people we'd have if we didn't have any heat.
I know.
Well, that's wonderful. So 18 of you were baptized at one time.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
That's awesome.
And of course, as you know, at that time, there was no Macquarie Manor, no Wonderland Acres, no Kingsley Hills, no Dixon Addition.
No high school.
And no high school. And but slowly, in the 40s, they started building all of these subdivisions, and the church started growing. And but anyway, before I get to that, then we had a training union. They started training, Baptist Training Union, which they're not having now.
No, right.
And the young men, at first, they met in Mr. Richards' home. The congregation, it was small at that time, and the ones that wanted to be in training union, they would meet at his home. And that was in October the 3rd, 1947, when they started that. But finally, the young men dug the dirt out of the basement of the white church.
Which is now, the white church actually sat on this property.
Yes.
And it was the old Methodist church, is
Yes,
that right?
yes.
And so it was bought and used for the first church.
Yes,
At that time, then they tore that down. They actually sold that church, it was tore down and moved.
yes.
Right? Okay.
But anyway, they dug the dirt out from under that church, and they built Sunday school rooms down under that white church. And so then that's when we would have our training union classes down in that
Wonderful.
bottom of that church.
Did y'all have Sunday school at that time too?
Yeah, they had Sunday school, but they would section off, and I want to say they had curtains. But anyway, a group would meet in different
areas.
Yeah, different areas. And so anyway, they had training union, and then they had prayer meetings in people's houses. In fact, your mother, Wilma Hicks,
Right.
said she was saved in one of those prayer meetings.
Isn't that awesome?
Uh-huh.
She was saved in a
Yeah,
prayer meeting.
yeah. They would go to different people's houses and have prayer meetings.
So they had small groups back then. A lot of the new churches now today, they push small groups to meet in people's homes. And so they even had small groups back then, back in 1947.
Yeah. And then they went to different churches to start Sunday school.
Yeah.
And one of the churches, I remember going with them, was, if you remember, before Kingsport Baptist Temple was built,
Right.
there was a small church there.
It was.
That's where your family went to. I can't remember the name
Well,
of it.
they'd always used the expression down at the well.
Well,
That's what they called it.
Yes.
And it was, of course, they was Beeson Well. That's where the name come from, and that's where they went to
yes,
church.
okay. Well, a group from our church went down there one Sunday and started Sunday school.
That's awesome.
And they had, we had Bible schools. They had, women had WMU meetings. We had youth socials. And there's that picture of that bus and all of the church
Right.
congregation. We went on a picnic up next to Mountain City.
Really?
And so they did a lot of entertaining,
Right.
Like I
Kept you
said.
busy. Because back then, there really wasn't many other places to go.
No.
So the church was the center hub of the community.
Yeah.
And so now would the Methodist church kids get involved with you all as well, or the group get involved, or they pretty well stay to themselves, or how did that work?
No, not now the only time we would be involved is when the youth, as I said, we had a Friday night sing night.
Right.
And we would have one Friday night a month. It would be at Bloomingdale. The next month it could be at Kingsley. Next month at Vermont. And then one time we went to Washington Chapel. Yeah.
That's a long way down the road.
And that's what I said. We did a lot of
A
walking.
lot of walking. There wasn't any cars
No,
much back then,
no.
and you did a lot of walking.
And of course, Mr. Richards, he'd always load his car up with, young people and maybe other parents. And we would have a sing night with the youth. And of course, I got acquainted with a lot of the youth there at Kingsley and also at Vermont. And so we would have a good time there. And as I said, we had vacation Bible schools. And let's see what else I can remember. And then, as I was saying, then in the late 40s and early 50s is when they started building all these subdivisions.
Right.
And that's when our little white church had outgrown.
The area.
Yes. And that's when then, and Mr. Richards resigned in December of 1950. And of course, then Reverend Byrd was called to be pastor in March, I think.
So you were a couple
51.
months without a pastor.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And so then when it started, everything started booming here in Bloomingdale and the church started growing. That's when then Reverend Byrd, he started, the building process.
Yeah, I know. I can remember back as an early child when I was here, he would always consider the buildings as being educational buildings. He'd build an educational building, but then we would also have the sanctuary in that educational building till we outgrew it, and then he would move forward.
Yes, it's just like today, you take the back of this building,
Yeah.
it's Sunday school rooms.
Right.
That was the second auditorium.
Second auditorium, yeah.
And then where the office area is and all that area, that was the third auditorium.
And this one being the
And
last.
then this one is the fourth
Yeah,
auditorium.
it's really amazing that he had that dream of what he wanted or what he needed to do here, and he had it right on through, and he followed it through to the end.
And of course, with all these areas booming, as I want to say, the church grew and grew and grew. So,
and how long was, just shipping a little, how long was Ples choir director here?
off and on for, Preacher Byrd had it down 27 years.
27 years.
Yes. And I think, though, at times when his daddy was pastor, he may have led singing there, too.
He always had a love for music.
Oh, yes, that was his first choice.
Yeah, love for music. And then Patty came, your daughter, she played. Now, did Margie play too?
Yeah, Marcia played the piano for about a year and a half.
And then Patty played.
And then Patty played the organ for a couple of years. And so anyway, we've been involved all through these years. And anyway, it's like I said, in the late 40s and 50s when everything started building up, then we outgrew, and they just had to keep building.
Had to keep building.
Yes, and then anyway, my life, I go back to when I was a little girl growing up in Virginia. We lived close to the Methodist Church, and I always loved going to Sunday school and Bible school, and that's where I learned about God and Jesus Christ.
Amen.
And I have always been a believer. And then, and I'm happy to be a child of the King.
Isn't that the truth?
Yes.
So that's just your whole life story. You can see how the hardships and things. People that know you've had hardships.
Oh, sure.
And people we've seen that all the way through. But what we see is that smile.
Yeah.
And that smile is because of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well,
And
that's such a blessing.
And I learned as I got older, you have to have more faith. You have to have faith to believe that God will be with you. There's a little song that says, footprints walking with me, footprints I cannot see. Each move I make, each step I take, He's always right beside me. And when you remember that, and each day is like I said, I take it one day at a time. if I don't get a phone call that one of my kids is in the hospital, then I'm fine. So you have to put your faith and trust
Amen
in
to
God.
There, Bobbie, honey, I can't tell you how much pleasure this has given me
Well,
to sit down and talk to you.
well.
And I know it's going to be a lot of pleasure to the people.
I hope so.
In fact, I'm about to cry now.
Yeah,
A lot of pleasure to the people.
I've met a lot, I tell you, through my years, I have met such wonderful people from these churches.
Y'all have always had a love for one another, and we
Yeah.
still do.
Yes,
We still have
yes.
that love
Oh,
in the church.
yes.
I have people come and visit and say, you know, there's so much love in your church.
Uh-huh.
And we do love one another.
Oh, yes.
And it's because of the past that we've been through and the
Uh-huh.
bringing up that we have.
Yeah.
The last 80 years, people has meant a lot to this community, this church
Oh,
has
yes.
meant a lot to this community.
Oh, yes, yes. Yes, this church has built this community.
Praise God. Well, there you have it.
Yes.
We're so wonderfully pleased to have you today. I just can't imagine anything any better than this sitting down and listening talking to you.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I
we look-
always like to reminisce back and think back, you know. It's not been easy. Don't let me tell you it's been easy. It hasn't. You have your struggles in church.
Oh no, there's a question about it.
And but you know, God's there to help you through it.
Oh yeah, yep. Just have to put faith and trust in Him.
Uh-huh.
We're going to be talking to a couple of musicians that's been around for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, we're going to be talking to those, and we've also got an oldest Sunday school teacher we're going to be talking to and bringing her on here as well. But thank you so much.
Okay, you're welcome.
We love you.
I'm glad to do it.
Y'all join in next time, and we'll be having more to say beyond the pulpit right here at the same place at the same time next week.